Beloved, pause for a moment and listen carefully. Respect is not always withheld because you lack value. Sometimes it is delayed because God is still shaping the weight you are meant to carry. What people thought about you was never the full story. They formed opinions while you were in motion. They judged a season that was incomplete, and because they could only see what was visible, they assumed they understood who you were, but they were watching a process, not a conclusion. You were not overlooked by accident. You were not ignored because you were insignificant. God allowed the misunderstanding because premature respect would have interrupted your formation. Some things cannot be honored until they are anchored. While others spoke freely, you remained restrained. Not because you were unsure of yourself, but because you understood timing. You knew that defending yourself too early would weaken what God was building quietly. So you stayed steady. You let silence do the work that explanations never could. What they mistook as absence was actually preparation. What they labeled as delay was divine intention. And even now, something has begun to shift beneath the surface. Not loudly, not suddenly, but deliberately. Respect was not taken from you. It was held back until you were ready to carry it without losing who you are. During that season, many misunderstood your quietness. They assumed silence meant uncertainty. They mistook restraint for hesitation. But what they never realized was that silence was not your weakness. It was your discipline. You didn't speak because you were afraid of being challenged. You stayed quiet because you were learning how to stand without approval. You understood that not every misunderstanding deserves a response. Some narratives lose their power when they are left alone. People tried to define you by what they could observe. They measured your value by visibility. They assumed that because you weren't announcing progress, nothing was happening. But while they were talking, you were becoming. You let assumptions exist without correcting them. You allowed people to believe what made sense to them, not because you agreed, but because you trusted that time reveals what arguments never can. You were learning how to remain grounded while being misjudged, and that kind of steadiness can't be rushed. This season required restraint that few people ever see. It required self-control when explaining yourself would have felt relieving. It required maturity to stay aligned when silence felt uncomfortable. And even though it wasn't easy, you stayed steady. What others called passive was actually intentional. What looked like waiting was really positioning. God was teaching you how to carry clarity without urgency, how to remain centered without recognition. Because respect that arrives too early can distort identity. And now, the very silence they misunderstood has become the foundation for the respect they are about to give. What most people never saw was the cost of staying quiet. Silence may have looked calm on the outside, but inside it carried weight. There were moments when composure required effort, moments when patience felt heavier than resistance ever would have. You questioned without quitting. You wondered without walking away. You showed up steady, even when clarity felt distant. Not because you had all the answers, but because something deeper kept you anchored. There were nights when doubt visited quietly, not loud enough to shake your faith, but persistent enough to test it. You asked yourself if waiting was wisdom or hesitation, if restraint was strength or missed opportunity. And still you stayed. You carried uncertainty without broadcasting it. You moved forward without reassurance. You learned how to trust God without constant confirmation. That kind of faith is not loud, it's refined. Others assumed your silence meant confidence. But the truth is, it meant commitment. Commitment to stay aligned even when understanding lagged behind obedience. Commitment to remain faithful without visibility. Commitment to grow without applause. It stretched you internally before it ever elevated you externally, but that stretch mattered. Because it taught you how to remain stable when nothing around you affirmed your direction. What you endured in private strengthened you in ways public success never could. It built discernment. It built endurance. It built depth. And that depth is the reason respect is about to arrive differently this time. Not because you demanded it, but because you learned how to carry weight before it was given to you. There was a reason God didn't move as quickly as you wanted him to. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't distance. It was testing. God wasn't watching to see how talented you were. He was watching how you carried yourself when no one affirmed you. How you treated people who misunderstood you. How you handled being unseen without becoming bitter. This season revealed more than patience. It revealed character. It showed whether you would stay aligned without reward, whether you would remain consistent without recognition, whether you would protect your integrity when it would have been easier to compromise. You were being trusted with preparation before being trusted with position. Because influence without depth collapses under pressure, and visibility without maturity distorts purpose. Scripture reminds us that humility comes before elevation, that those who endure are established, not rushed. God was shaping your capacity before changing your reputation. You were learning how to stand without applause, how to move forward without affirmation, how to let obedience speak louder than urgency. And that discipline mattered more than speed ever could. The delay wasn't about holding you back. It was about making sure that when respect arrived, it wouldn't change you, because respect reveals what was already there. And now the testing has produced clarity. What was being formed in private is ready to be recognized in public. Now listen carefully, because this is where many misunderstand what respect really looks like. Respect does not always arrive as applause. It doesn't always announce itself. And it rarely comes in the way people imagine. The shift you're entering will feel subtle at first. You won't need to change how you speak. You won't need to prove anything new. You'll show up as you always have, but the response will be different. Conversations will slow when you speak. People will listen instead of interrupting. Decisions that once moved without you will begin to wait for your presence. Not because you demanded attention, but because your words now carry weight. You'll notice it in the tone people use with you, in the way your name is mentioned, in the pause that follows when you share insight. This is how authority reveals itself, quietly, naturally, without force. What's changing is not your personality, it's perception. God is allowing others to see what was already there but previously overlooked. Your steadiness, your discernment, your consistency. Respect is not being given to you as a reward. It's being entrusted to you because you've been prepared to carry it. That's why it feels different from recognition. It doesn't inflate you, it grounds you. Scripture tells us that God establishes the steps of those who walk with Him. And when He establishes something, it doesn't need to be defended, it stands on its own. This is not about people finally agreeing with you. It's about them acknowledging the authority that has been formed in you over time. The same truths you've always carried will now be received instead of resisted, not because they changed, but because timing did. And this is only the beginning of the shift. Now hear this clearly, because this is where many people misunderstand favor. Respect does not arrive to make life easier. It arrives to make responsibility heavier. God does not change how people see you so you can relax. He changes it so you can be trusted. Because respect brings expectation, and expectation reveals character faster than rejection ever did. When people begin to listen, your words matter more. When doors open, your decisions carry weight. When influence increases, restraint becomes essential. This is why God waited. He was not just preparing others to respect you, He was preparing you to handle it. Visibility tests humility more than obscurity ever could. Recognition exposes motives. Authority reveals discipline. And God will not elevate what cannot remain aligned under pressure. This next season will require discernment. Not every invitation will be alignment. Not every opportunity will be God. Respect will place you in rooms where silence still matters. But now, for a different reason. You will be watched more closely. Your reactions will speak louder than your intentions. Your consistency will matter more than your charisma, and the same God who formed you in private will expect you to walk with wisdom in public. This is not a warning, it's confirmation. God does not give weight to those He has not strengthened to carry it. So don't rush this moment. Don't misuse the shift. Let respect sharpen your focus, not inflate your identity. Because this elevation was not given to change who you are. It was given because of who you became. Something important has shifted within you, even before others fully notice it. You are no longer managing how you're perceived. You are no longer adjusting yourself to fit old narratives. You are no longer explaining growth to people who stopped listening long ago. Your identity has settled. You don't feel the need to react the way you once did. Opinions that used to shape your mood now pass without staying. Misunderstanding no longer threatens you because you're no longer building your sense of self on how you're seen. This is what alignment feels like. Not louder confidence, not constant certainty, but quiet stability. You know who you are becoming even when others are still catching up. And because of that, respect doesn't intoxicate you. It doesn't pull you out of position. It simply confirms what God has already established. You're no longer striving to be noticed. You're no longer shrinking to stay comfortable. You stand steady, not rigid, not defensive, just grounded. Your presence speaks without effort now. Peace has replaced the need to persuade. Clarity has replaced the urge to prove. And trust has replaced the anxiety of timing. This is not detachment. This is maturity. You can move forward without fear of being misread again, because your foundation is no longer external. It was formed in private, strengthened through restraint, and anchored by God Himself. Take a moment and let this settle. Nothing here requires a reaction. Nothing needs to be announced. Some shifts are meant to be carried quietly. You don't need to explain what God has done in you. You don't need to prove that things have changed. Respect does not need promotion. It reveals itself naturally when the time is right. Walk forward steadily, not louder, not faster, just aligned. The season of being misread has ended, not because you defended yourself, but because truth has matured. God has already spoken concerning you. What he establishes does not unravel. What he aligns does not require constant effort to maintain. Your responsibility now is not to chase recognition, but to remain faithful to the clarity you've been given. Let your consistency speak. Let your peace speak. Let your life communicate what explanations never could. If this message aligns with where you are, carry it with you. No need for performance, no need for agreement in public, just awareness. And if you know someone who has been growing quietly, misunderstood, overlooked, or waiting without complaint, let them hear this too. You are not striving to be respected anymore. You are simply walking in alignment. And from here forward, respect will meet you where you stand. God has already spoken.